I'm not blaming James Bradberry.
I mean, that's not up for my judgment. I was hoping he would let it go, but of course, he's a ref. It's a big game. It was a hold, so they called it.
How hard is it?
I'm blaming the defense. And then the coach. Where to begin? The Philadelphia Eagles lose the Super Bowl in dramatic fashion, criminal fashion. I've heard it described many different ways here. It's post-flight on Philly Voice. So thank you. Appreciate you being here. Thumbs up, subscribe, all the regular things you're asked on any YouTube video. What happened felt like a kick in the face. It felt like a sledgehammer, but it wasn't like you saw it coming. It was a sledgehammer on the back of your head, a shovel. It was just awful. It was a terrible feeling to go through a loss like that. There's no way around it. And so many people are going to focus on the final flag because either they think it wasn't a hold or the timing of it and everything. And this is from Fox. We're going to hear a lot. We're going to hear a lot of sound to try to put this thing together.
Worst case scenario, you'll see James Bradberry. They're going to say he grabs him. He's got his left hand on his back. I don't know. My worst case scenario, you'll see.
Yeah, you'll see the first hand grab him, the second hand kinda. Whether or not it's a hold, I don't think it's up for debate. When it was called, absolutely is up for debate.
It is 3rd and 8. 3rd and 8. 1:54 to go.
This is WIP.
35-35. McKinnon to the right. Mahomes in the gun. 3 receivers right. 1 left.
It's rough,
Mahomes
man.
Takes the snap. He's back. He is firing, and it is incomplete, but there's a penalty flag thrown. The pass was
Mahomes is doing this shit. You're like, oh. And you knew it wasn't going to happen. You knew it. Right there, you knew it. And the problem is they were in this position in the first place. The problem is that there was only really one big play to really point to that could have been game-defining in the second half. And it did lead, mind you, to a score and ultimately an octopus. But where was the majority of this in the second half?
1st and 10. Hurts has them on the move. He is back. He is going deep. He's got Devontae Smith. And Devontae Smith is out of bounds at the 1.
And we know what happens, right? Hurts, the unstoppable play. The Eagles came out in the first half like most Super Bowl losers who ultimately can't hang on in the game come out. Assuming that you're not getting blown out right away, and that's not the Eagles. The Eagles are way too talented. They're way too well coached. What I'm about to do is be upset, is yell, is be mad, but at no point is this typical old mentality. Somebody's got to go. We got to get rid of this guy right now. He can't stay around here. This Jonathan, get him out. No. Jonathan Gannon was elevated and continues to be thrusted to the top here, right to the top. He's probably going to get a job, if not this year, next year. And I'm not saying he does not deserve it. Rooney Rule, all the other things you want to have a conversation about, that's different. I'm more than willing to entertain that conversation. But my point here is this was the game. You hire a head coach, a defensive-minded head coach, to run a defense and slow down the best of the best. You're not hiring a defensive-minded head coach to go up against Derek Carr, to go up against Andy Dalton. The idea is that you are going to be the last team standing, and the best quarterback who snuck through or made it or earned their way in, however it is there, and you're going up against him. Jonathan Gannon had to coach. He had to scheme. He had to adjust. And he didn't do it all night. It seemed pretty evident that there was a heavy emphasis on guys winning battles all year and kind of like, all right, man, what do we do now? Andy Reid was famous to then infamous for saying here in Philadelphia, I got to put my guys in a better position. Jonathan Gannon did absolutely nothing to put his guys in a better position to make plays. In fact, the one or two times in which you did see aggression came as the result of really bad plays, like this one.
Mahomes in trouble, gets away. Mahomes racing with the bad ankle and all inside the 20 to take it down.
A bad ankle. You can't get to this guy on a bad ankle? What is going on? What is happening here? You were historic. 4 guys this year with double-digit sacks. People were talking about the new monsters of the Midway, the new purple eaters, whatever the hell you want to look at, the fearsome foursome, all that stuff that was talked about. And it doesn't mean, this does not invalidate Hassan Reddick or the other 3 guys' season. But we know what we had with those guys coming into this game, and it didn't seem like there was anything done to help them. So you're essentially just rolling the ball out at that point, saying, go ahead, fellas, play some ball and see what happens. It was egregious to see Jonathan Gannon get out-coached and out-schemed and out-adjusted the way in which he did. Boy, we know Andy Reid not to be spiteful or anything along those lines, but if that's any other coach with a history of a city, like if that's Bill Belichick running back against the Jets, I guess Cleveland, you're talking about Sherman's march right there through the southeast part of Georgia. Just unbelievable. It wasn't a beating. It was an ass kicking. Running these stop pivot plays, reverse motion stop pivot plays. Andy Reid didn't run anything of the sort. He was setting it up. He was setting it up. It was a horrific game that Nick Sirianni, and I think he deserves a lot of heat as well. And we'll talk about why, because I thought Nick Sirianni coached a very good game. But this is the Super Bowl. Sirianni did talk about the play that everybody's talking about, of course.
No, I'm not. It's not my job to, you'll see me on the sideline. I'm going to argue with different things of calls here and there, but it's not my job to make the call. Those guys got to do that in split second, scenarios. And so, that's what he saw and he called it. And so that's never, I know it always appears to be that, it's one call that makes it. That's not what it is, right? It's not what it is. There's so many plays that contribute to the end result of the game, and today they were better than we were.
Absolutely, absolutely. In case you're not mad enough, here's JuJu.
Say it again. Oh yes, 100%.
Yeah.
My routes strike in, strike back out.
Yeah.
I mean, Bradberry's a good player, but I feel like at some day it's going to be the call's going to be called.
Look, Nick Sirianni's right. I think JuJu Schuster is right. James Bradberry right. This was a hold. The timing of the call is what's up for debate. You want to have that debate, you can leave the comment here. We always invite that. This is 106.5 The Wolf, but the game, if you want to define one play, and it's crazy to say this, right? I mean, it truly is crazy to say this, but the one play that if you really wanted to boil it down and say, well, that was the difference, was this.
Spread set. Hurts by himself in the backfield. Threat to run and throw. Crouches down. He wants to run it. Put it out. The ball's out.
Unbelievable.
He kicks the ball. It's picked up by Kansas City. They're going to the 20, to the 10, to the 5. Touchdown, Kansas City.
All right. All right.
Defensive
Enough of
score.
that. Enough. All right. I don't need the whole Kansas. I don't need that. Not today. Not today. He almost had another one. They called that one back. Miles Sanders. That was the right call, but it was a combination, right? A tale of two halves. And for what we saw, the first half was all Philadelphia. The rest was a disaster. It was a disaster. Now, let's look at what happened here with Nick Sirianni. We'll bang through the 3 keys, but I want you to hear more especially as far as like things that went down in the game and how it impacted, I think, the coaching. Jonathan Gannon, number one, like we laid into him, rightfully so. All this, the whole, we're going to roast him. And he was turned into a folk hero, and he's been elevated as like a sexy candidate again, as far as being a head coach is concerned. Shane Steichen, I mean, that's the first time on the broadcast I've ever heard anyone on the broadcast bypass Nick Sirianni as the offensive mind here. In fact, it was so bizarre that I made a note of it. And then as I'm driving back from Fox 29 late last night, I'm listening to the postgame show on Sirius, and Pat Kerwin is talking about that. A former exec and agent and scout, and he's done it all. No, I don't think he's an agent, but exec. He's saying, well, that's okay. Nick Sirianni is the brains behind this. Nick Sirianni is the guy that's running the offense, that's designing, that's adjusting. So let's talk about the offense, because the defense was horrific. The defense allowed way too much. And this thing specifically, and I'll tell you this was the defining moment, I would say, on defense.
Back-to-back plays.
Blitz coming. Mahomes, man wide open. Touchdown, Chiefs at Sky Moore.
That's it. That's the one. That's opening things up, right? We've seen this now twice, calling a play that wasn't even in the design, wasn't even in the execution. Hey, man, we didn't know about that one. They exposed the Philadelphia Eagles defensive setting, the fact that they were leaving their zone because the guy that they were initially looking at was in motion. So, like, all right, I don't have to worry about him anymore. And then here he goes, sneaking right back in. And it happened multiple times, including the play in which Bradberry held Schuster. Let's talk about the offense. The offense, I mean, what happened?
Hurts.
Where was this in the second half?
Taking a shot, looking for A.J. Brown. He's got it. Touchdown.
I don't know what happened here. Nick Sirianni had a masterful first half, using plays that the Chiefs had no answer for, from Hurts up in the air. It was a combination of game plan that, even if they weren't working, like the run game was clearly Jalen Hurts, right? And things got tight. Remember, this thing was tied at one point. That was the Nick Bolton one that brought it back to 14. And then it kind of had that 7-7 vibe with the Niners. Like, all right, just pull away here. Just pull away. And we saw that again with this drive capped.
Now Hurts on the key. Has a seam, and Jalen Hurts is in for the touchdown.
It was amazing to see Nick Sirianni devise a game plan, Jalen Hurts execute the game plan, everything else fall into place. Took a little bit, but we saw Dallas Goedert second half, Devontae Smith hands all over the game, and of course, right there at the top is the newest addition this year in A.J. Brown. Run game, it didn't matter. Kenneth Gainwell getting involved. If Miles Sanders struggled or was hurt, Jalen Hurts is the run game like he is the passing game, so you always had that. It was a beautiful piece of artwork. But something happened on the purchase at the gallery to the home, to being able to put it up there. Something smeared, something ripped, something was destroyed. A bump in the road, whatever it may be. Nick Sirianni, 11 points in the second half. 8, of course, as we know, coming on that big play from A.J. Brown. It seemed as if there wasn't enough of that in the second half. It seemed as if they ran out of those plays. To go back to something, it's tough. And that's where I think Steve Spagnuolo had him. That's where you saw the defense able to take advantage of some spots. And that's never going to work in your favor if you build a lead that you can't sustain. It's just not. It's not. All right, here we go. 3 big keys, 3 big takeaways. Ready? Number 1, Jonathan Gannon was thoroughly emasculated. I mean, it was awful. Patrick Mahomes, look, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, this is not to say, again, Jonathan Gannon get out, fight a guy. No. Jonathan Gannon is a talented defensive coordinator. Jonathan Gannon has recognized that he has a ton of talent and has been able to facilitate that in his game planning and his scheme. He isn't rolling the ball out week to week, but it was reduced to that by two guys in Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And look, Andy Reid, we should hear from him in this regard because these two individuals are up there with not quite yet the level of success, but just below with the Brady, Belichick. This is a head coach quarterback combination that will not be seen maybe until Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, he grew up in a locker room. He's seen the greats, and he strives to be the greatest. I mean, without saying anything, that's the way he works. I mean, he wants to be the greatest player ever. That's what he wants to do, and that's the way he goes about his business. And he does it humbly. I mean, there's no bragging. He could stand up here and give you these stats that are incredible that he's had, but he's never going to do that. That's just not him.
No, and it's no job losing defeat. It's nothing to truly look at and say, oh my goodness, this guy can't coach in the NFL. But it's something that I don't know if he's able to ultimately do if had the chance again. And I'm saying like as a head coach running up against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, who can say that they would be able to do that? Not many teams have done this. Not many teams have knocked them off, right? We've seen this team create dynasty level right now. But there was no adjustment. There was no ability to change up, to put more pressure in different times, to cover, even if it is a blitz, to create something exotic, to cover up the pressure. It just seemed like at some point we're going to break through. And that actually goes into the second part. You want to look at both offensive lines first and foremost when you look at the lack of sack. Absolutely. Sackless was this game, right? For the most part. I think they counted one as like a run that should have been, but what have you. The field was awful. It was some of the worst footing that you've seen in a playoff scenario, I think, in a long time for me, ever. Go back outside of weather impacting, and that should never happen in the Super Bowl. But I'm saying even in a championship game, outside of weather, just like, oh, it's a nice 65-degree day, Sam, and it's sunny out, and these two teams should be able to put some points up on the board. And then you just see like a horse track. Stuff's going up all over, mud everywhere. This guy, nobody could get their footing. Neither one of the defensive fronts could get their footing. Isaiah Pacheco was a beast on the ground. Jalen Hurts was a beast all over. Jalen Hurts was the argument as far as could he have won the MVP as a losing player, a player on the losing team. It's probably a better way to put it. Number one, Jonathan Gannon. Number two, the offense fell apart. It's still a potent offense. It's still putting up points. It's still dangerous. It's just 11 points in the second half. You didn't get enough. You didn't get enough. Third, look, it doesn't boil down to a head coach or a coach, I should say, a position coach, a coordinator. It doesn't boil down to one play. But when you have limited opportunities, you can't afford to make mistakes. And that's why a special teams coordinator, their job is so difficult. They don't get the volume to make up for a mistake like an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, head coach who's running either side of the ball. It's never an excuse. It is never an excuse. But that punt return by Kadarius Toney was horrific. I mean, you cannot come back from that. Gut-wrenching. You want to put the penalty in there as a 3A, that's fine. But for me, those were the three keys. Look, I'm going to leave you with something positive. I'm not going to troll you and hit you with like JuJu next up. I think we're in a really good spot here as fans in Philadelphia for this football team. What's next is what you just saw. The Philadelphia Eagles are going to be in the tournament. The Philadelphia Eagles are going to be on top or right there in the NFC East every year that Jalen Hurts is healthy. That's a fair assessment, I think. Nick Sirianni is here for the long haul. I don't know what's going on with the coordinators. but you really genuinely believe that Nick Sirianni is here for the long haul, that Sirianni wants to build something. And I think losing the Super Bowl reinforces that maybe a little more than winning it, as we saw with Doug Peterson. There were extracurricular activities involved, but that's the point. You've got a big shot here. Address what you can with the Saints pick. We'll talk about the draft. We'll move forward on that. But right now, day after, it's not even the day after, just day after, look at the future, and that future is just focus on Jalen Hurts. That's the only thing you need to focus on is Jalen Hurts, because the future is so bright. Don't worry, I'm not going to do it.